Nice. Well, it looks like we've got a good group, so we'll go ahead and maybe do introductions and then talk about the book. And in fact, when we do introductions, maybe if you want to give your first impression of the idea and or the book. But it will be fun. And actually, this was a much better book than I was expecting. So I'm Paula Williams, ABCI. We help aviation companies sell more of their products and services. And I actually have a bias for the tactical kinds of books because I like to come away with books with like tangible things that I can actually do and make things better. But this one ended up being much better than I ever expected. So let's go ahead and go around the room in order of appearance. So you know when you showed up, hopefully. Go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe a first impression about the book. John?
John Williams, ABCI, and I work for her, do all the back office, a lot of the back office stuff. And this is one book I didn't read, so.
Okay, that's honest.
Apologies.
That's okay. So, and that's totally fine. If you're coming in cold, basically this book is They Buy Your Because by Wes Schaefer. And it is basically about, and it's kind of surprising for business to business that people make decisions emotionally and then justify them with reasons. And that's kind of the premise for the book. If you haven't read it, that's kind of the thing. So
I'm also be honest. I haven't read the book, but
that's okay. We're happy you're here.
But the title really caught my attention, and I'm here today to understand more about it, the key ideas, and how this might apply to the work life that all of us do.
Right. Understood. Cool. Well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting. I like the framework approach. I like the question approach.
Yeah.
So Ben Neivert, I'm Chief of Staff with DBT Aero. I work for Michael, so that's handy. We all have our bosses around. So I didn't understand the blank beer cans. And I did like the idea that he was grateful to his goats right behind his parents.
Mm-hmm.
I could never live through that. I wrote a book and put goats right behind my, no, never be home again.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be toast. But, I agree with you. It's very tactical. Maybe it's not really the right word for tactics, but it's very, what's the word they use for legal practice? They ask a question, what's that word? Socratic method. It's very Socratic method. And I like that. They ask a question and then you get to think about it. When we did leadership training, and I won't go too long, one of the things that we researched about training executives is you're way better off giving a test first, then teaching the topic, than you are teaching the topic and doing any kind of testing after. Because once they go through a test, even if you never score it or even get it turned in, they realize what their gaps are and pay attention during those sections of class. So you end up with this, out of the 40 people we had, 15, 20, 30 of them were always totally engaged, at least because that was part of the curriculum they didn't do well on when they were asked the Socratic questions. So I thought that was a great approach.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes the table of contents a cheat sheet. I was sort of thinking, I get to highlight all this stuff. And then I thought, wait a minute.
I don't need to highlight all this stuff. Yeah.
I'll just use the table of contents. And
He did it
anyway,
for you.
He did. It was very kind of him. Except I missed I somehow missed the part 4 and got into the book. I don't know how I missed the fact that there was a back. His table of contents goes part 1, part 2, part 3. And then I started reading the preface.
Yeah.
And didn't realize it was on part 4.
Page over.
Right.
On the opposite page.
Oh, yeah,
So,
exactly.
anyway.
So you skipped that part. That's okay.
Well, I picked it up later. Once I realized, wait, there's a part 4. It's got to be in the table of contents. So, yeah.
Right.
Good.
Exactly.
Good choice.
Good. Well, I'm glad you liked it. That's cool. And yeah, we'll be talking about the blank beer cans also. So that's cool.
Oh, you have a reason, do you?
Well, And it wasn't in the book. That's the interesting thing is, to do something and never explain yourself. That's kind of an interesting tactic for advertising, which is.
Oh, that's the connection.
Right. Patty, I think you were next and happy to see you.
Well, it's nice to see you again too, Paula and John. It's nice to meet you in person. I must admit, I did not read the book either, but I was intrigued by the title. So I do want to purchase it. I tried to find a summary, like the Cliff Notes version, but I couldn't find that quick enough before your book review. But I'm looking forward to hear what the book's about.
There is a trick to this, and that is ChatGPT. You can always ask the book for a summary or for some key points or whatever. So anyway, that's just a don't tell any kids I'm sure they all know better than I do how to cheat on their homework. But this is, we're all grown-ups here. So I think your real life experiences are 1,000 times more interesting than a particular book. The book is just a conversation piece. So I'm really happy you're here, whether you read the book or not. So happy to see you.
Good to see you too.
Michael, you're next.
Well, thank you. I'm Michael Duke. I'm the founder of DBT Arrow. And I did read the book.
Thank you.
So I also thought it was very actionable, and I really like actionable. There's a lot of things that are, I'll call them cerebral, and that's nice. They make me think, but there's a lot of books that don't even make me think. It's just like, here's what we did, and it's like, yes, so what? How does it mean?
Yeah.
I'm always looking for how can I improve my business? How is this going to help me? And I thought there were some things that were very actionable all the way through. It was very nice, nice process, well thought out. I thought it was well presented. My only caveat is that he's speaking from his experience, of course.
Yeah.
Which is with big companies.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of big company things that really didn't apply.
Yeah, that's true.
Go to your customer base and, cull through all the data.
Right. Thousands and thousands of.
Yeah. I'm a startup. I don't have a customer base. That's what I'm trying to create.
Yeah.
So that's my only nit is that from a startup standpoint, I have to do a lot more thinking and saying, okay, I don't have a customer base. How am I going to go out and do some of the things that he's suggesting? And so, that's okay, but it would be, I would not suggest this is the first book for a startup, but I think the concepts are marvelous and very actionable. And I look forward to taking the concepts and applying them to our startup.
Excellent. I'm not sure if Ali or Adila, who was next, but either of you that have the ability to jump in, please do introduce yourself and let us know what you thought.
I am Adila Shahid. Most of the clients already know me.
Happy to see you, Adila. I'm glad you're Adila most of the time.
Yes. So I work as a social media content creator in the ABCI, and I have to admit that I have not read the book because the availability of the book in our country is very difficult, especially if they are on the Amazon, etc. So it's kind of get different, especially ebooks, etc. So it's hard to, most of the websites don't work in our country. I don't know why. But yeah, but I'm here to understand what the book is about. And obviously, I'm into marketing, so I would really like to know they buy you because why. And it's a very, I think, great medium to connect with the clients as well. Yeah.
Glad you're here, Adila. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Ali, are you able to jump on, or I'm not sure if you're...
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. And good to see you all. And I'm Muhammad Ali. I'm from ABCI. I work for Paula and Angel, John, and Adila. And I'm also a content team leader. And for me, I also didn't read the book, but title is so inspiring. As a content team leader, we've been producing so much content for our clients. So it's basically for me relating to whenever you sell your services or products, it comes to me that what are your values, what are your backgrounds about your product and services. So I'm really much glad to the topic and looking forward to conversation. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. So let's start with the beer cans. Let's clear that up right off the bat. And it is interesting because in a lot of cases, advertisers and or artists do not explain their work. And I think that's a really interesting phenomenon. It's left to us to interpret what they meant by that. And I was really interested because I was listening to an interview with Brian May from Queen. And, somebody was asking him, do you understand, like, what is the story behind Bohemian Rhapsody? And he's like, well, I really have no idea. I was just told to sing it and I did, and it was a thing that we did. And nobody really knows that. And, Freddie Mercury's no longer with us, so we will never know. And everybody creates their own meaning from that piece of art. But what I took from the cover of the magazine is basically you have a commodity. So a lot of times when we start working with a client, like let's say a flight school, and there's 3 other flight schools on the field, they all fly 172s. They all rent their planes for 200 an hour wet, and an instructor for X, Y, or Z. And they feel like they have a commodity, and the only way that they can compete is to reduce their cost per hour or push students out faster or, something like that. So they want to make their can of beer or can of beans or can of whatever. If it's a commodity, the only thing you have to compete on is price. Uh, but the way that you combat that is you break out of that by making yours different. And, you have to emphasize what is different. Maybe your instructors are all former military, so they teach in the same way. And so then you can really relate to those GI Bill kids who want to spend their military money learning to fly. They're familiar with the military process, all of those things. So, I mean, there are always ways to make your can blue, and if you haven't seen the book, it's like this row of gray cans, and then one of them happens to be blue. And I think, that's the interpretation I take away from the cover, but of course he never explains it. So, but I think that's the thing. What makes your can different from the others is the story behind it. How can you add value to your product or service with the story that comes behind it? And in a lot of cases, that is you resonate with a particular buyer. So you're not trying to go after every kid that wants to fly or every grown-up that wants to fly or every doctor that wants to fly in his spare time or whatever. You're going after those GI Bill kids that have government money to spend. They have military experience. They have a particular set of similarities that you can build on. And, so your because is taking former service members, turning them into pilots, and giving them this amazing life that is an option for them in a way that is super efficient and relatable to them. So that's one example. John, you had something, I can tell by the look on your face.
Well, even though I hadn't read the book, just glancing through it, it appears to me, and I haven't read it in depth, so
okay,
that I have to agree with Michael because its approach assumes bigness.
Yeah.
And then when I went through business school, the marketing class did the same thing. They assumed everybody had a multi-million-dollar marketing budget.
Yeah.
The majority of folks in this country don't. I mean, we're not working for Coke or Pepsi or.
Yeah, they also assume retail, right? Yeah.
And when he talks about creating marketing and sales messages and real world examples from brands that get it right, he's talking big companies.
Yeah.
That's not where we are anyway.
Right.
I'll jump in because
maybe
I got us going down a different path than I intended. I actually loved the book. I would give it 9+ out of 10, and I almost get nothing 10. So
wow. I was gonna say this is a first.
Yeah, this is a first. I thought the book was really very good. And I totally understood the front cover.
Mm-hmm.
He explained the beer cans multiple times, multiple ways, what they did to make their beer stand out, with
Sure.
the blue interior, not necessarily the exterior, but the blue interior lining and all kinds of stuff. So to me, it all made sense. How do you stand out
Mm-hmm.
so that people want to buy you? And one of his opening stories in the book was, going to buy some barbecue sauce, and he ends up staring at shelves of barbecue sauce. It's like, how do they stand out?
Yeah.
How do we make our beer stand out?
Yeah.
How do you stand out? And it doesn't matter if you're a commodity or not. The
Mm-hmm.
question is, how do you stand out? I mean, we have something that's really unique.
Mm-hmm.
Do we stand out?
Well, obviously. Right.
I don't know that we do, because when I go talk to people, they're like, yeah, okay, it looks different. So what? And it's like, you don't get it? It's like, we have literally reinvented an airplane that has aerodynamics that is not taught in literally, I would be willing to bet it's not taught at any university anywhere in the world, how our plane flies.
It's not, because it's never been done.
And so how do we stand out?
Mm-hmm.
Even though we look different, people don't understand the next step.
Yeah.
And that's what, while I was first thinking that, he's using your because
Mm-hmm.
as a why. And as I thought, and he said, no, it's not a why. And as I thought about it, it is a why, but it's not my why. It's somebody else's why.
The customer's why. Yeah.
Buy.
Mm-hmm.
Why they're going to buy is because. And so it doesn't matter what my why is for doing the company and how, why I'm involved. It's really about their why. And, I'm going to buy because of my why, what I want,
Mm-hmm.
what's important to me, the customer, not important to me, the vendor, the seller.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a nice differentiation. And and though a lot of people want to know, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I should share why I'm doing this, why it's important to me. But in order to, and that may build trust, it may build connection, it may build a lot of things that lay the groundwork. But I think throughout the book, his ongoing belief system that people buy for their reason, how does it change their life? He's calling it your because.
Yeah.
You should buy from us because I'm going to do this for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going to do this for you. And which is really all about their benefit. It's how does what somebody's doing benefit someone else? And I think that's a really important concept that I need to be focusing on the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And back to the same thing. Who's my customer? Do I really know who they are? What do they want? And how do I satisfy their wants? I mean, maybe it's simple marketing stuff, but it's done in a way that is very actionable. And I really liked that. And so, I don't want my little, I used to work for a big company, and it makes sense. There's lots of big companies out there, and that's his background. So where is he speaking from? He's speaking from his experience. Right. And I think it makes total sense. So I loved the book, and it's very actionable. And I don't mind, doing some of the work to say, okay, how does that apply to me?
Yeah.
Fine. But no, I thought it was a great book. I thought he answered now, he didn't specifically talk about the blue can versus the gray can that's on the front, but I thought it was, that's
pretty
really
obvious. Yeah. Yeah.
To me, that's the concept of the book.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stand out? And here's how you can stand out. Let me give you a whole bunch of tools, questions, worksheets, And that's what I really liked as well. Not all of those worksheets are going to work for me, but a lot of the worksheets will. And they'll at least inspire thoughts that say, okay, well, how do I take this in a direction that I need to take it? But yeah, I thought it was a great book, and I would recommend. I would recommend it.
Fantastic. See, this is why I love having engineers on the call, because that is really clean thinking. It separates it from like Simon Sinek's "What's your why?" And those the things.
Which I love, by the way. I love Simon Sinek's. You start with why.
Yeah, start with
I
why.
like the second book probably better, but in any case, the concept is great. But it's really then about our motivation, number one, and then being able to say, okay, what are other people's motivations? And this is basically saying something very similar. It's you need to get to their why. Why do they want to buy? And it's because you can do something for them. So
yeah,
it's a different spin on the same topic, but it's all about you have to get into their head.
Yeah.
And again, Simon Sinek talks about the emotional versus the logical.
Right.
Tony Robbins is all about the being able to justify your emotional drive. They're all saying the same thing. They each have a different way of saying it that connects with different people. But it's, some things are pretty basic and straightforward. Now it's, how do I make those things actionable? Some people make Tony Robbins actionable. Some people, Simon Sinek. I thought this was, from a corporate marketing, incredibly actionable.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Let me come back to Ben's point about the Socratic method. One of the things that Larry found, Larry Heinbaugh, and I wish he were here, but I'm going to talk about him anyway. When he started teaching about aircraft logbook best practices, everybody thinks they know aircraft logbook best practices. Everybody thinks they're an expert, and everybody thinks they know what needs to be done and how to do it, and they think their logbooks are fantastic. But when he started putting quizzes together and putting quizzes in his, here is why, well, basically find out, first of all, how much you actually know about aircraft logbooks and what could be better. And if you start with that quiz or you start with those questions, then you're opening a bunch of loops in people's heads and getting to that point where they are open to receiving new information and realizing how it applies to them. And I think, that really gives you a way to get into there because you actually are making some mistakes that are costing you money or that are costing your company money. And a lot of people don't know that until you open those loops. And the only way to get those loops open is to ask those questions. So, Ben, I thought that was an excellent point. I don't know if you had anything further on that you wanted to.
Yeah, well, there's a fair number of people. There's one guy I really like who teaches courses about negotiating, and one of his, and I found it to be shockingly powerful, is people are willing to tell you a lot of things if you give them the field to do it. You ask open questions, or you what he calls mirroring. You kind of turn the last thing they said into a kind of a question to see if there's more content. When I was doing merger acquisition work, one of the most powerful things is everybody understood that because they were being interviewed for a merger or an acquisition in most cases, that I had to take careful notes. Even though I had an AI note taker, I took notes.
Yeah.
And often there were long pauses while I was writing down what they say. And all kinds of wonderful stuff would come roaring out while I'm writing, and they're waiting patiently for me to finish writing. They just start talking. And we found out some incredibly critical pieces of information by just being silent for 30 or 40 seconds. And all of a sudden you find out there's some serious flaws in their marketing strategy, or key customers are leaving that hadn't been shared anywhere else because they were very careful answering questions. But when there's silence, they fill it in. So, and it was nothing dangerous. I wasn't being underhanded. I explained exactly what was going on. And often I when I used to do them in person, I would write out all the questions and put them on the table so they could see where we were going, and they had the option to answer them or not. Generally speaking, they could talk about anything they wanted, and I tell them that up front, and they do. So, when you look at the idea, the questions in here, I really thought it just took me back to the brand work we did at Ernst & Young.
Yeah.
The first, who is the ideal customer? We did that exercise with all kinds of startups, all kinds of big corporations. What the heck does this ideal customer even look like? We did complex technographics that broke up markets into segments and their ability to use technology and what they hoped to get from technology and what they were willing to do with technology versus in person. What did they prefer to do talking to someone versus what they were willing to do online? And there were a whole bunch of use cases where you should not expect to close the deal online. They just weren't going to do it.
Right.
But if you could convert cleanly to a person, that close activity was very clean. So the idea of what does an ideal customer look like, what insights, that there's a huge push right now around sharing valuable content. When I was starting in consulting, everything they used to teach us was never share the valuable stuff. That was all top secret. Now, the opposite's true. You publish all kinds of things, and if they like it, they hire you figuring you'll do it.
Yeah.
We ran into a lot of trouble at Ernst & Young. When you're 50,000 people, you have to make sure the client understands that me and my team are actually experts in the topic. We're not presenting slides we don't understand in US English versus, in my case, Australian or UK.
Right.
The first thing they grab on is if the spelling is US spelling, they figure pretty well we don't know what the slides mean.
Yeah.
That we're just presenting slides from some guy in the US.
Right.
And why should they hire us?
Yeah.
So, when you look at what he's doing, it's nice generic. I think he does go after, he mentions Coca-Cola, he mentions these high volume commoditized products. And when I worked at Coke, they used to walk around telling you we sell sugar water, but we sell a lot of it at a really high margin.
You can't argue with that.
We went to a warehouse with 1 million Cokes in it in various shapes and sizes, and they turned that thing every day, and that was Sydney, Australia, not even a big city.
Yeah.
They would move 1 million items every day in that warehouse.
Wow.
So,
that is pure
Coke.
marketing. Yeah, and that's why they use them in all the universities and everything else, because there is nothing about Coke except marketing. Well, and, it kind of tastes good, but other than that.
Well, it's sort of poison, but yeah.
Oh, I know, but the Mexican Coke is just kind of nice. I kind of like that, but I'm showing my bias with the sugar.
There was a bunch of different formulas for Asia Pacific.
Oh,
that
okay.
you couldn't get other places. Yeah.
Yeah.
The nice thing about working in the Asia Pacific headquarters is they had everything. Everything Coke made was in the headquarters in fridges for free.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. So you get to taste it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you better not be drinking something else.
Oh, of course not. That would be like walking into an independent coffee shop with a Starbucks cup in your hand. It's just,
Oh, no. Drinking a competitor's product at Coke is grounds for immediate dismissal anywhere in the world.
Wow. I did not know that.
It's written in your contract.
Okay. All right. It's a good thing they make water. Otherwise, everybody would be dead by now that works for Coke.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I guess that's true. Yeah. Anyway,
They have the
so coming back to the book, I like,
Yeah. Okay.
you talk about I like he has a systematic approach, but he does kind of say, you can break the rules as long as you know you're breaking the rules.
Oh, of course. Yeah. One of the things that I think was the most powerful was just, people don't necessarily buy because of your product. They don't necessarily buy because of your company. They don't necessarily even buy because of your team, which is a really strong point for everybody in this room. Everybody comes from a very strong company with a great team of people. Sometimes, the very best thing that you can offer is asking the right question. If you ask the right question of the marketplace, then that is the most powerful thing. And, that really just made me stop reading, put down the book, sit there for a full several minutes and go, wow, what is the question? What is the question we should be asking? And, how do we frame that in a way that gets people's attention and that really frames our product or our service?
If you're
My consulting company was, sorry, John, go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead.
When my consulting company was owned by a company called Ingersoll Milling Machine, they made these transfer lines where you put in a block of metal at one end and an engine block came out the other, completely finished.
Oh, wow.
At the time, this was in the 70s, at their height of their production, they made, they were about $20 million each. And Ford and these companies would buy it, and you drop in a rough casting, and out came a finished engine block. And they were extremely unique in the industry because they really asked some really good questions.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they realized was that companies were not getting the value out of the equipment they were buying.
Yeah.
They would spend a huge amount of money on a flexible machining center and then run it like it was an old manual machine. And they couldn't understand that they spent $5 million on an automated piece of equipment they ran manually and got no savings. So it was very interesting, the questions they would ask to these big buyers to understand how to generate value.
Yeah, exactly. I want to hold space for, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but, I've noticed some of the posts, especially that Wyvern's been posting on LinkedIn, and they actually do a pretty nice job of asking questions.
Sorry?
Wyvern?
Oh, Wyvern.
Yeah, Patty's company.
Got it.
You wanted to mention any of that or any of the thinking behind that, Patty? Because I think you're doing an amazing job of just, like there's one, safety isn't reactive, it's predictive. You're like, no, wait just a second here. Safety in the aviation industry is always reactive. I mean, that's the mechanism behind the FAA and the NTSB and all that stuff. So how do you turn that around? I don't know if that's something that you want to share any of the thinking behind some of your open loops.
Certainly. So we have 3 people that post on LinkedIn. That particular post was mine.
Okay.
Thanks. So I'm trying to. That's why the title of this book interests me, because they buy because of your because. And what I'm trying to do is lead with service and not with features. And I'm having a hard time coming up with good questions. I notice that occasionally when any of us do leave questions, leave your remarks in the comments. We don't get a whole lot. And I've noticed that some of our others, not necessarily competitive, but other people in the aviation industry get lots of traffic with good conversation. And I'm looking for that like magic sauce, and I just can't seem to come up with it. But we're trying to, with our SMS software, that's where the predictive would come in. Our SMS software integrates with CAS. So CAS does that continuous, surveillance, we'll say, and hopefully like they would notice like an anomaly, something that, you wouldn't have picked up, but because of CAS, then it can automatically feed into SMS and you might find something. For instance, a brake problem. Maybe a certain aircraft always is coming in early for brakes. And you've noticed that now on your CAS reporting. And so you send it through the SMS system. So we're trying to be predictive instead of reactive. So now we know that this particular airplane has a problem. And we found out that the pilots may be flying this aircraft, that their sensor is saying they need to apply more brakes. You'll have to forgive me, I'm not a pilot, so if I'm saying the wrong thing. So they uncovered that something was put in wrong. So now they can go back and fix it and be proactive and prevent an accident from happening by realizing something, by being proactive all along instead of reactive. So anyhow, trying to find the right questions to help people to find out their pain points I'm having a problem with.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah.
You know what? Aviation is all about predictive.
Yeah.
I mean, right down, even flying in the military, we'd spend 45 minutes on safety before we ever got to the airplane. Every time we went out on a mission. It's all about predicting this and predicting that. Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And what do you think about? And they went so far as to say, what was it? You were supposed to assess the risk of the mission on a scale of 1 to 10. And then if it was above a certain point, then they'd have to go back and change something or you don't go.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So our tools has that FRET tool built in. They can do like the pre-flight risk assessment before they go. And but to John's point, yeah, we try to be as predictive instead of reactive. Although we learn from the reactive.
Of course.
Lots of lessons to be learned when things do go wrong. But looking for those perfect questions to get either a conversation started or companies to think about what they need and maybe how Wyvern can help. That's where I was struggling, trying to come up with interesting social media or the newsletters right now. I've been writing all the newsletters, just coming up with topics that are interesting for the industry.
Right. A question, that, and I don't know if this is even appropriate, but, one that might work well for you would be something like, would you trust your family to a charter company that meets the minimums or that meets the FAA minimums, or however you want to phrase that? Because, you guys don't just tick boxes, you actually get into the mechanics of safety. And, then you can go into, because that's a question that opens people's head.
Yeah.
And then you have the room to jump in. Right.
Yeah. Would you put your family on that flight?
Yeah, but a better question is,
okay,
how do you ascertain that a particular charter company is in fact compliant with the FAA?
And that's where our charter vetting software comes in. So SMS, so we have 2 platforms.
Yeah.
The charter vetting platform, where our operators upload all of their information, their aircraft information, and then we have their pilot information. We have crawlers that run in the background that pick up like accidents and incidents from the
NTSB.
Thank you.
Yeah. It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
It does. and like puts that information. So even if we have an operator who's a wingman operator, I was given a small demo this morning. I don't normally do demos, but I was given a demo on our software. And even if the operator is a wingman operator, we've vetted them, we've certified them. Each trip is still unique because each trip has a different destination. It has different pilots. They might have selected a different aircraft. And that trip might not pass because maybe the pilot hasn't flown an aircraft in the last 90 days.
Yeah.
You want to know that information.
Oh, rusty. Yeah.
And it's even worse than that. I mean, I flew 135 a long time ago, and you have guys coming in, Texas cowboys, wealthy, go jump in an airplane and say, we want to go to this little town down here. And, it's a VFR day and you take off and you get down there and, oh, well, that's not where they really want to go. They want to go out to this ranch, which is 75, 80 miles away from the town. And can't you just go out there and land?
And they think you can.
And I said, well, we can go out there and assess where you want to land. That doesn't mean we will, but that sort of thing happens even today. I mean, not like that, but you get changes in flight en route.
Right. And that, I don't know how pilots do get NOTAMs like that, if they do get them while they're in flight. I don't know the actual particulars. But maybe they do get updates. I know a lot of them fly.
My wife whacked me in the head.
That's a NOTAM.
No, land there. That's how I get the notices.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's cute. I know that that normally you get written documentation, but I think everything's on iPads now, and I don't know if they get that information constantly while they're flying or not. I really don't know the technology there, but that type of information is really helpful when you are trying to promote your product, how the different things work in the background. So I'm one of the only employees that does not have an aviation background where I work. Almost everyone is a pilot or has been involved in aviation in some way. So I'm still learning
Well, every background is useful, and that's a wonderful thing.
Can I just a second? I think it's interesting to ask questions, but if I come back to Gerry O'Brion's premise, the questions aren't going to sell.
Yeah.
The questions in his process is step 2, gather insights. And step 1 is, identify your ideal customer. So if you're asking questions of the wrong people, you're not going to get the right insights. But then when you gather those insights, so you ask the questions, you have a dialogue, you're getting input. But his point is you then have to turn it into, so what?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What is the outcome that needs to happen from that outcome? What is the because? What is what is your reason then for buying that outcome based on the insight from the question that was asked?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, I love asking questions, but does it really move them towards a sale? If I look at this book and what he's suggesting, the answer is no.
True.
Ask questions all day long, and all you've done is spur a conversation or get somebody to think.
Yeah,
your product.
Right.
So let me ask a question then. With respect to this book, what's his assumption? Are you doing one-on-one sales, marketing, or are you doing marketing to a group?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I agree. The framework is the same.
Absolutely does. The reason it does is because if you're marketing to a group, then you can do group facilitation and you can get a lot of stuff out of these people.
Well, that's not the point. The point is whether you do group facilitation to ask questions, other insights, that's not what's going to sell them.
Yeah.
What's going to sell them is moving through the process and so that you can come up with outcomes and their why, their because that says, here's why they are buying. They're buying.
You can draw that out of them in a group. Whereas if it's just one person, you don't really know.
Right. But that's just one step in the process, right? Also very important. Yeah.
He got much more actionable data at a much lower cost by doing one-on-one interviews than by doing group facilitation. That was a key learning at I think course. And so it's like, we stopped. I mean, he worked at P&G, Coors, others. Maybe it was P&G, but in any case, one of his jobs, he basically said, we spend tons of money and actually we got better information. I'll take that back. I don't think he said we got better information. It was far cheaper. Far cheaper, and they still got the necessary information one-on-one than in a large facilitated group. But I think the end of the bottom line is the questions are cool, but it's the beginning of the process.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But most companies, right, most companies that we work with, at least at the beginning, don't even get that far. They're not asking the questions. They're still talking about their product as if they knew the answers to everything. And yeah, so I would say it's a very, very vital step, but it is a very preliminary step in the process. So the other thing about this, I think, key point about the book is that it is kind of a nice antidote to AI. I mean, if you're worried about AI doing all of your marketing and things like that, AI cannot do this. This is a higher order of thinking. Of course, you could put this framework into AI and it can probably help you with parts of it, but the strategic thinking behind this is something that I don't think you could fake. Because it has to be real in order for it to work. And I think
it's changing.
Yeah, that's true. Customer perceptions are changing. The questions, their reasons, their why, their because is changing. So you got to stay in tune with your customers. This kind of forces you to ask those questions and stay in touch with your customers in a way that is not fake, and that's kind of a nice antidote. People that do this are going to succeed. People that use AI to just explain their product better without digging into all of this are not going to be as successful. Anyway, yeah, that was a closed-ended statement, and I need to do this better. This is one thing I need to do is, 2 things that I've learned from this session, and I keep learning them over and over again. They say you keep learning things until you get good at them. One of them is to end, when you're having a conversation, leave it open-ended at the end. And number 2 is to shut up and leave space, as Ben was saying. And I'm not very good at either one of those things. John can tell you that.
Well, now you're leaving space for somebody else to jump in, which is fine. You don't always have a question. Sometimes you leave the space and, somebody else can jump in with something that they've been thinking while, someone like me has been hogging the conversation. So, I'll shut up.
And
I am the strong believer of this conversation that leave the space and leave some, you can say, conversation left behind and revisit the things again and again to come up with different things. I really believe on this.
In fact, one of the things that you and I talked about when this is actually a while ago, is that, too much information is just as bad as not enough. So, leaving that space, leaving people some room is a wonderful thing. And you do that much better than I do. Adila Angel, anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak, did you learn anything today that was new? Was there anything that you are taking away from this that you didn't know before?
I think has been a very insightful conversation, and I have learned very good stuff from obviously Ben explaining everything. That shows that he has definitely read the book and he has find the book really interesting. And so thank you, Ben. Sorry. Thank you, Michael. Michael has read the book.
Yeah, I think you're the only one that read it cover to cover. That's pretty obvious from today's conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, because you have taught us a lot about marketing. And I have learned about asking questions and how much questions to ask, and then what to do with the questions that you have asked. So that's really great. And I will definitely apply these things that I have learned today.
You're welcome.
And I am kind of getting interested in finding some way to read this book.
Yeah, we got to figure out how to bootleg it to you. And
yeah, I think you sent an Amazon card, but Amazon was not working, and then I find some ways to try to get the Amazon, but they were definitely not working because of the phone verification. But I'll see if I can find it.
We will find a way. Some of our hacker friends might be able to figure out a way to do that, but nobody is recording this conversation. It's fine.
Whenever I do a book club, the book club ended with this. Then we will find a way.
We will
to get
find a way. I know.
yeah.
It might take us a long time, but that's all right. I'll keep
That's from
your
my
hand
side.
up. Yes.
Yes, I totally second Adila's point that Paula, you are very good in asking questions and you direct the people to find the solution and answers by themselves. Most of us really rely on the information and rely on the other person to give us some direction, give us some quick answers to, you can say, target our information or come up information which really needs us. But you are very good in directing the anyone to dig out more, ask relevant questions, and find that this is the right direction you have to move on.
I appreciate that. I find the older I get, the less I know, or the less I know that I know. Angel, did you want to have the? I know we've got just a few minutes left, and you haven't had a chance to throw in. So, anything
Yeah,
about that?
yeah, I really appreciate all the insights that I learned today, and the book really informs that sales isn't just a transaction; it is also a transfer of trust, which I really appreciate.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. And that's huge, especially in our industry. Even more than buying a can of beer or a T-shirt. I mean, we're. I think every one of us in this room understands the life and death nature of what we do for a living, and how we have to get it right, and that's pretty key. The trust is huge.
But at least on your way to death, we're having a really good time.
There you go. Yeah, we're all going the same place, but we're having a fantastic time on the way. And I really appreciate everyone showing up today and contributing your insights. I learned a whole lot more. I think we need to put Michael on payroll. And Ben as well, and Patty. I mean, you guys all, and John and Angel and Ali and Adila, all of you guys really had some great thoughts and contributed a lot to our understanding. And I love doing these because it's a great way to open your mind, beyond what you currently know. And that's really the key of, all of the successful people that I know are willing to consider new ideas, bring them in, talk about them, play with them, incorporate them into what we do. And, the book, that's the whole reason for the book club. And thank you so much for sharing my love of geekitude and being here with us. So.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. You guys have a lovely afternoon. And we will, of course, be talking soon about one thing or another. And hopefully I will be leaving more space for in conversations and more open-ended questions. So you guys have a great afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.